Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to discuss what is an ode. In our BA Part 2 syllabus, several odes have been prescribed. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, Ode to a Skylark, and Keats's Ode to Autumn. So, in this section, before I begin with the discussion of what is an ode, I would like to give a brief introduction to the distinguishing features of ode and its origin. And then we will move on to discuss the odes by Shelley and Keats in detail, the respective odes which are prescribed in your syllabi. Like its parent form, the lyric, the ode is of Greek origin. It is a serious and dignified composition, almost always in rhyme and longer than the lyric proper. Ode is often in the form of an address. Notice, ode is always in the form of an address and is sometimes used to commemorate an important public occasion. For example, in Ode to the West Wind, the poet is addressing the west wind. In Ode to Autumn, Keats is addressing the autumn season. In Ode to a Skylark, Shelley is addressing the skylark. Each of the characteristics of an ode can be analyzed as I discuss them here one by one. First, ode is in an exalted subject matter and elevated in tone and style. Neither the theme nor its treatment can be trivial or undignified. The poet is serious both in the choice of his subject and in the manner of its presentation. He must show himself at the height of his power. For example, the difference between the style of Wordsworth's poem on simple country scenes and incidents and that of his sublime ode on the intimations of immortality are entirely different. And as we read these poems, we can at once notice this difference. Secondly, ode is longer than a lyric proper, for the emotion it embodies is of a kind that admits of development. It does not, like the lyric, aim at giving the effect of unpremeditated art. It may be full of deep and sincere emotion, but its expression is expected to be much more consciously elaborate. Consciously he elaborates upon it, impressive and diffuse. Then next, unlike other forms of verse, ode is often addressed directly to the being or the object it treats of. The opening lines sometimes contain an atmosphere or an appeal, which is characteristic of the whole treatment of the subject in the poem. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind begins with "O wild west wind," or Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn begins with "Thou, still unravished bride of whiteness," or Tennyson's To Virgil, Roman Virgil, thou that singest, and so on. The mode is maintained throughout in each case. Sometimes the ode has for its theme an important public event like a national jubilee, the death of a distinguished personage, the commemoration of the founding of a great university. For instance, marvels upon Cromwell's return from Ireland and Tennyson's Ode on the death of Duke of Wellington are examples in point here. Now I move on to discuss the Dorian or Pindaric ode. The Greek ode has two forms: the Dorian ode, so called from the district and dialectic in which it arose, and the Lesbian ode, named after the island of Lesbos, where it originally flourished. The Dorian ode was choric and was sung to the accompaniment of a dance. Its structure was borrowed from the movements of the dancers. It consisted of three parts: a stanza form known as the strophe, during the recitation of which the dancers made a turn from the right to the left. Then a similar stanza form known as antistrophe, during the recitation of which the dancers made a counter turn from left to the right. And a third stanza form, different in structure from the previous two, known as the epode, E-P-O-D-E, epode, during the recitation of which the dancers stood still. This sequence of a strophe, antistrophe and epode could be repeated any number of times in the ode of this type. It is repeated thrice in Gray's odes, The Progress of Poesy and The Bard, which are among the most successful imitations of this form in the English language. From its brilliant use by the ancient Greek poet Pindar, the Dorian form is more usually known as the Pindaric ode. Next is the Lesbian or Horatian ode. The Lesbian ode was simpler in form than the Pindaric and has therefore proved easier for poets to imitate. As exemplified in English verse, it consists of a number of short stanzas, similar in length and arrangement. The treatment is direct and dignified, and the thought clearly developed. The Horatian ode was popularized in Latin by two Greek Roman writers, Horace and Catullus. The works of Horace in particular served as a model to English imitators of the form, and English odes of this type are commonly known as Horatian odes, a practice which tends to obscure their Greek origin. The following two stanzas from Andrew Marvell's Upon Cromwell's Return from Ireland, which is the Lesbian, or the author termed it Horatian ode, illustrate its characteristics. They describe Charles I's conduct on the scaffold. Here I quote from the ode. He nothing common did or mean upon that memorable scene, but with his keener eye the axe's edge did try, nor called the gods with vulgar spite to vindicate his helpless right, but bowed his comely head down as upon a bed. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind and Ode to a Skylark can also be placed in the similar category because both the poems also imitate the same pattern where the stanzas are similar in length and arrangement. As it is evident from this example which I just now quoted, recited, the stanzas are short, having only 4 lines each, and similar, observing the same arrangement in respect of rhyme and meter, and convey the thought in a plain, straightforward fashion. The style is sober and stately after the Latin manner, with none of the passionate warmth of the Pindaric ode. The ode in English literature. Except for a few attempts in the Pindaric or the Horatian form, the English ode has pursued a course of its own as regards subject matter and style. Of treatment and outlook, not strictly bound by classical traditions. It is either regular, consisting of a series of exactly similar stanzas like the odes of Shelley and Keats, or irregular, when each stanza follows a different arrangement, as in Wordsworth's Immortality Ode and several other odes of Tennyson and Robert Bridges. I would like to pause here, and in our next discussion I will discuss a few characteristics of Romantic age to which Shelley and Keats as well as Wordsworth and Coleridge belong. And before we begin with Shelley's odes or Keats's odes, it was essential to discuss with you what is an ode and what are the characteristic features of romantic age. So thank you for the day, and let us move on tomorrow on the characteristics of romantic age. Thank you once again.